And doing what we're supposed to do means we have to give a voice. We have to be willing to have the humility to do something different. And when we start willing to talk about it, when we're willing to share our story, by leaning into that vulnerability, life changes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Currents Podcast. I am Carolina Allen, and I'm the founder and director of Big Ocean Women, and we are the world's leading maternal feminist organization dedicated to promoting perspectives of faith, family, and motherhood. And I'm here with Jeremy Boberg, who is our guest for today. And Jeremy is a wealth of knowledge and has over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker. And he has a ton of other credentials to his name. You're also certified in EMDR, is that right?
Yes,
Jeremy? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll share a little bit about why we're having this conversation today in light of our tenant.
Yeah. So I first started out as a substance use disorder counselor, and I was treating substance use for over a decade. And the more I got into it, the more I realized, that you can't treat addictions without treating the underlying mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And, we see words like we self-medicate, we escape using the chemical intoxicants or the behaviors that we become addicted to. And I quickly understood that, we need to go deeper into the therapy. And the more I got in deeper into the therapy, the more I realized we need to go to the trauma. And
Yeah.
the trauma is unmet needs. And that's the core focus and the tenet that I really focus on in my practice is what are the core unmet needs that leave us feeling inadequate or anxious, depressed, and that we continue to self-medicate. So that's where my specialty is treating trauma, unmet needs, and addictions.
I like the way that you said that, unmet needs, because I think it really does get to the core of the issue, and it peels back that layer of the onion of addiction. And then we're looking at what are some of those unmet needs, places where people may feel less than, and then they're reaching out for those other things to, like you said, self-medicate, fill in those holes that they feel in themselves. With unhealthy things. That's really important. So the tenet for this month is that we are each unique and individually innately worthy of respect. And Big Ocean Women, we feel like once people feel like they are one of a kind, that they're extremely unique and special, and they feel this internal innate self-love, then the respect, they respect themselves, they can then respect others, they can extend that respect to the exterior and the external sphere within all relationships and whatnot. And so it's very core. And so we thought to invite you on because, well, number one, we can't fail to mention your mom, Gloria, who is a big part of Big Ocean Women and has devoted so much of her time and talents. And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree with, all that you're doing. And it's just a theme that keeps coming up, especially worldwide with women all over the world. We're seeing common themes of just really unhealthy relationships, abuse, verbal, physical, emotional, spiritual, and sexual abuse. And I just wanted to bring in an expert to have this conversation with me today so that we can take a deep dive and really look at what some of these issues are, like how they're impacting women and families, and then what we can do about it. So one of the biggest things that happened in Big Ocean Women was during COVID, people were sheltered in place, and there was a huge uptick of women experiencing a lot of abuse at home. And the family dysfunction that may have already been there, it just became exacerbated. And it got us all talking about domestic violence and abuse at home and what can we do about it? And one of our waves in Nigeria, led by the incredible Fatima, they got together and they created like a community forum where the men and the women, they were all masked. They were all like, social distanced. And they created a kind of a forum where they brought in experts virtually to talk about healthy marriages and healthy family life. And they got the dialogue going. And so in a lot of communities, mental health and family stability and emotional health and all that is still very, very taboo. My question is, what have you found to be the most important way to kind of break down these barriers to be able to even talk about mental health in communities that may not feel like it's an issue, or that we can just pray things away, or it's just a lack of enough faith to overcome something? Like, as an expert, what have you been able to see as being a helpful tool to break down those stereotypes?
So what I hear you asking is, how do we break down the stigma?
Mhm.
Really, what I'm hearing you ask is,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do I overcome the shame of giving this voice?
Yep.
Whether it's depression or anxiety. We still surprisingly, back in the 80s, we didn't tell people that we're going to see our therapist.
Yeah.
That was so not okay. Nowadays, we go to, we go to our friends and family and we say, yeah, I just got out of rehab. And everybody says, oh, congratulations.
Yeah. It's changed.
It's so different. And yet there's still stigma with a lot of people. There's still people out there who don't even believe that therapists are really, they do much, or that, they're just head shrinks and full of it. I'm at a gentleman in the area where I live, so he just tells people, if you're depressed, just get over it.
Yeah.
And there is no such thing.
Mhm.
Um, depression, anxiety, even especially when we go deeper to trauma and complex post-traumatic stress. When we get into those, you need somebody to help you out of it. There are some holes that are so deep, we can't get out of them ourselves. And one thing that I found as a therapist working with patients with trauma and depression and anxiety is oftentimes just simply my outside perspective on what they're going through is enough to help them shift focus.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. This morning I was working with a gentleman in a therapy group. He's older, late 50s, really nice guy, but he has a lot of trauma throughout his life. And he was referred to us through his EAP and for some addictions and some help. And he's in aftercare now. And he just came to a group for kind of a dusting off. And one of the issues he brought up was feeling a lot of shame and guilt for a best friend who he had found had harmed himself. And he said the core thing that when I asked him, what's the worst part of the whole ordeal for you? And he says, I should have done something.
Yeah.
And when we replayed the scene, when we replayed his memory of it, he was at his friend's house helping him clean out his shed within workshop the night before. And his friend kept saying, don't throw that away. I want to keep this. But let's go ahead and throw this back in the back of the truck. Well, I don't need that. Then this equipment I'm going to use, this equipment I'm not going to use. And they went through the entire workshop of things that he's going to keep because he needs them and things that he's not going to keep.
Yeah.
The next day, when this client went to his friend's workshop to help him load everything up, and he found his friend hanging.
Oh my gosh. That is
He,
not a
for 15 years, he has held this terrible shame of, I should have done something. The outside perspective he got from us was his friend was goal oriented.
Mhm.
Things in the future. He was talking about, hey, I need this equipment. I'm going to use this equipment.
Right.
And he was able to see this different perspective because his perspective was, I should have been there.
Yeah.
And that was just his trauma. Then the reality was his friend gave him no indications that he was going to take his life that night.
Yeah. Wow.
And
That's such a heavy burden for someone, and suicide is something that is happening so readily. It's just, I remember back in the day when you just hardly ever heard of someone taking their life, and now it's happening. It's many, many people's lived experience living with the trauma of that. And
yeah,
so you're telling me that it was this, you're able to help him from an external point of view to point out that, look, he was looking forward to keeping some things that he would need later, and like having that kind of a realization was just pivotal in the healing of this individual.
just we don't realize we're doing it. For 15 years
Mhm.
and stuck cycling, fixated, and we call it perseverating in this
Mhm.
belief that I should have done something. And for the first time in 15 years, it took an external source for us to shine his light of awareness and say, look, you couldn't have. He gave you no indicators. And when he caught on to it, it's almost like he got smacked in the face. And he was like, oh, I'd never thought about it like that. And sometimes that's all a therapist is somebody who helps you see things from a different point, from a different perspective. To help, there's several different skills and tools that we've been trained in to help the human cognition to be able to look and shine their light of awareness onto a different aspect and see our world from a different angle, from a different view.
It's so key. You need that catalyst to kind of kickstart thinking things in a different way for you to self heal and then move on to the next, steps of healing in the journey. What have been some of your, like, this was a really, really great example with our community of women. We hear often horrific stories of abuse and just the maltreatment of women and mothers and children. We just hear heartbreaking stories. What are some things that we can do as a community to support one another? Because, it's devastating that, therapy just isn't something that people have access to around the world. Like, it's, they're just looking for their day-to-day, how am I going to feed myself and my family?
I think the first step in getting help is identifying this problem. Identify that I'm neck deep and the water's rising, and I'm about to drown in this mess of internal turmoil and toxic shame. Before I go too deep into that, I need to say, what are some of the things that prevent us from reaching out and getting help? You mentioned one is access to resources, right? I don't know where you're at. You're somewhere in the Salt Lake Valley, I assume. I'm here in Utah County. We're half an hour, 45 minutes away, and yet we're communicating via the internet. We can do this worldwide. We now
Right.
have EMDR therapists and trauma therapists that use teletherapy worldwide. Now, the problem with that is getting access. So some developing worlds don't have that access, and we need to be able to access that. But that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the toxic shame. As an individual, let me rephrase it. We as individuals are sometimes too afraid to share our secrets or to even share our story out of secrets, shame, and fear of judgment. That is the biggest problem we face. And that's the biggest problem as a trauma therapist, I face with my clients is I need to quickly gain trust of the individual to the point where they're going to share and divulge their deepest, darkest secrets with me. That's the hard part. And so it takes a sense of kindness. It takes humility on both ends. For you to share your deepest, darkest secrets with me, that takes an incredible amount of humility and trust. People who have been hurt, betrayed, and have unmet needs are also the people who are desperate to be seen, to be valued, to be nurtured and wanted. But many of those people have no idea what it feels like, what that really means. And they often revert back to their old cycle, their old tapes that they play in their mind. Nobody cares. Or if I share this with you, you're just going to use it as a tool to hurt me.
Right. I was going to say, like, the trust component is huge because to be vulnerable and to share something, especially when it's probably been used as ammunition against them, takes a whole lot of trust and courage to do that.
Yeah. So taking the individual, they realize that, hey, I've got something wrong in my life. I need help. So let's say that there's some viable resources. In most communities, there's spiritual leaders. And this is why most organized religion has a bishop, a father, a priest, some kind of an ecclesiastical leader who does some form of counseling or who I can go to with my problems. There's a cognitive value to that. Just simply sitting with somebody and sharing my story and have somebody listen is highly therapeutic. It's very cathartic in our healing process. And most of those individuals are not trained to be therapists or counselors. They just know to listen and be kind. Now you add that listening and that kindness, and then you add skill sets like psychoanalytic therapy or trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, eye movement desensitization reprocessing or EMDR therapy. And now we're using that to really get deeper and cleanse the internal conflict, making it permanently go away.
Wow.
That's what we're looking for. That's what we're trying to do with our clients.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I have recently come across a little bit of, because you're talking about clergy and the role of faith, and our other tenant last month is talking all about faith, that we are women of faith, and in Big Ocean Women we really gather a lot of Christian women of faith. And I'm becoming aware just recently, and it's something that has really been probably one of the most painful things that I've discovered, where the faith community is doing the violation, is doing the abuse. And it's, very covert, and it's very much hidden and secret. And there are a lot of people suffering in various, communities of faith where this goodwill, where people's, just goodness and decency have been a perfect cover to hide some really dark things. Have you experienced any of that? And if so, like, what can we do as a community to be watchful and more nurturing and sensitive to individuals who have fallen victim to this?
Absolutely. Now, I've seen this on small scale and large scale, and we typically there's not a lot of evidence. People will say of large scale abuse. This is what I would call organized ritualistic abuse.
Okay.
And we see this a lot. And let me give you some evidence that I'm watching in real time, right?
Okay.
We know that professionals estimate that there's over 2 million children worldwide being trafficked.
Okay. Yeah.
That's just the numbers of children that are missing and evidence that there's this flavor of they're being trafficked. We know that historically, the most trafficked children busts that come up are around Super Bowl. You follow the Super Bowl, and you're going to see trafficked children every year. It's just clockwork.
Wow.
It's not a coincidence.
Mhm.
Those two alone is not coincidence. There's going to be some sense of organization to that. Let me give you a little bit more. We know that developing world and war-ravaged nations, especially some of the African nations and Ukraine, Haiti, Dominican Republic, after natural disasters or war, you're going to see all of a sudden children go up missing. You don't care if the men necessarily going up missing just out of nowhere or the women. It's typically what we're seeing is the children going up missing. So
And they're well verified and documented by aid organizations that are around here. So this is not just conjecture. This is proven data.
right. That's data. The Super Bowl data is proven data by the FBI. Then if you follow the news articles, you've got Jeffrey Epstein, and all of a sudden, his black book, it's there, but nobody's talking about it.
Right.
We know somebody has his client list, but all of a sudden nobody's talking about it. It just kind of we're gonna hush that. You've got Diddy and all.
Yep.
How that's just we even hear articles that there are certain people out there who are doing non-disclosures with that. Okay. And today, here's a specific one. In Ukraine Parliament today, they voted against a call for grooming gangs to investigate grooming gangs.
Wow.
huge. That I think
Wow.
that's telling that it was 300 and some odd to like 111. What is that telling you? When our government says, no, we're going to turn our blind eye to sexual predator and we're not going to investigate any of these cases, to me, that tells me that there are larger organizations that are engaging in ritualistic sexual abuse and human trafficking.
Wow.
So that there's 5 or 6 concrete evidences right there. This is happening. Now, most of that is, we're not seeing so much. What I'm seeing, in my clinic is a lot of individualized. This is where there's a group of people, uh, very common with my practice, a lot of polygamist organizations. Now, I'm not saying polygamist organizations are bad. I'm not saying that at all. But in a lot of them, there's a lot of ritualistic abuse going on,
Yeah.
and I have treated numerous people from those organizations that have been sexually abused by brothers, uncles, fathers, grandfathers, clergy, neighbors, all within that community.
Mm.
And so that's a big one that we're seeing out here right now.
I have to say, just really quick, like, because somebody could say, well, that's all, like when we talk about the bigger scheme of things, that things are covered up, that there's no real proper investigations being made. And people could say, well, it might not be that bad. But when you really look at the data that's being showed by many organizations across the board, clearly it is happening. Then you ask the question, why is it happening? Well, it's a huge industry, wouldn't you say? Like money-making industry, like you mentioned the Super Bowl. Like there's a lot of, demand, and it's just the supply is feeding this demand. And then when you talk about it in the individual, local community thing, it breaks my heart because it's like the victims are there. Clearly you're seeing them. You've seen many, many, many come through your door whom you're helping. And it kind of falls on the shoulders of folks like you in the healing community, in the therapy community, or in the medical community that are trying to help people piece their lives back together after this horrific abuse. But because it's so secret and people don't want to, they kind of like to turn away because it's something that isn't pleasant to think about or to look at. It's like the pool of support is just very, very, it's small for people. And it's the people that need it the very most, this kind of broader community of support. Like, we see you, we understand this is happening, and we're going to believe you, and we're going to try to support you. Have you found that there are a lot of victims out there that just don't feel heard and that don't feel like,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the majority of my clients will tell me stories of not being heard, not being believed, or here's a common one I see, um, in step families. I often see stories of a stepbrother or stepfather sexually abusing, or even biological brother, biological father sexually abusing children in the family. Mom knowing about it,
oh
because
no, yeah,
that that that's it. Again, that's evidence of it's not a mass, large organized, but that is a smaller organized ritualistic abuse. And that teaches that abuse victim as not to have a voice. And here's some interesting things about that. As an EMDR therapist, I'm always talking about where do you feel that in the body. And the author Bessel van der Kolk is a modern day psychiatrist who wrote the book Body Keeps the Score. Incredible book. And he talks about how the body has visceral feelings to it. And oftentimes these children that grow up as trafficked or sexually abused, they feel tension in the throat. And this is oftentimes because I don't have a voice.
wow,
I'll hear women tell me that they have tension in their hips. And the first place my brain goes to is, tell me about the sexual abuse.
wow,
And they don't even realize that the body keeps an emotional tension in the visceral areas that and it places it there, and then it maintains it as with like almost a sense of security of I'm not safe.
Wow. Well, it's like it's almost as if something has happened, and because nobody believes, because nobody's come to the rescue, it's like the body has no other option but to hold on to that reality.
Mhm.
And so it gets stored and locked up.
Yeah.
And that's it's like a witness, like your own body is a witness of the harm that was done to you. And it's both a beautiful and an extremely heavy load to bear. Like, it's beautiful in the sense that no one's gonna get away with anything. Like, everything is being documented, whether we like it or not. Good things and also very evil, wicked things are being captured. And these survivors, these victims, you know, I was reading in my holy book of scripture recently in it, and something brought me a lot of comfort, which is that everything will be shared from the rooftops at some point. And you can't think for a second that if you've done something to harm, especially the innocence of a child, that you're going to get away with it. And at some point, things will be divulged and shared because all of truth is being captured. And how courageous for these victims and these survivors to continue on and to seek help for their future and their progeny, their children.
It is courageous. I feel it's important to talk about how do I get help and what do I do from here?
Yeah,
How do I know that there's a problem? A lot of my trafficked clients were not aware that they were trafficked.
really. How is that possible?
I had one family, the husband would drug, give his wife and two daughters benzodiazepines to get them so inebriated and sleepy, and then he would traffic them. And they had
Oh
been
my,
for almost 15 years until the wife caught on to things were out of place, something's not right. And one of the daughters started talking about some memories that she's having, of dreams that she's having. They had no idea. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff starts coming out, and these memories start coming out that they had completely dissociated. You see, your brain has an ability to what we call trauma block. This is where we block out painful memories, feelings, and emotions. And on the body keeps a score. We don't have a memory of it. So I could be sexually abused for years. And during that abuse, I'll have an out of body experience. And I have no memory of it. You know, my body's there, but my cognition is not there.
it's a
This
way to self-preserve, right? It's probably the body's coping mechanism to
it is.
survive.
Yes, it is absolutely survival. And
Mhm.
into a dissociative state, and I'm not there. I'm not present. This is very common. And so relying solely on memories is not always what I would be looking for it with my clients. In fact, when I'm doing trauma therapy, I'm not in there saying, okay, let's try and bring back repressed memories. We don't
Mhm.
memories. We don't try and bring up repressed memories. Some memories may come up. And if they do, okay, we'll deal with them when they come, but we're not chasing repressed memories. What we're doing is we're following the body.
Okay.
When you say, I feel depressed, you mean it. I feel. And in your body, you'll feel that depression. You may feel it in your heart. You may feel it in your sternum or your stomach. And we feel. And that's why we want to go to the therapist, because I don't want to feel this way.
Mhm.
What I'm telling the listeners is check in with the body. Notice what your body is telling you. And oftentimes, if you're not familiar with it, like who knows that the outside hit, and I'm feeling tension there, that could be directly correlated to sexual abuse.
Wow.
People don't think about that. People don't think about, oh, I've got this tension in my throat. It's hard for me to swallow. Well, it's because you don't have a voice. You know, we know what a broken heart feels like, but this other visceral feelings we don't really talk about. And so as we start learning about our body and paying attention to the body's going to tell us we need help. We have symptoms of anxiety, panic, depression. Some days people struggle just to get out of bed, people who struggle to find joy or connectivity and trust in life. These people, they're the ones I'm looking for to say, okay, we need to get you some help because there's PTSD or complex PTSD. Now, PTSD is short in duration, but extremely high in intensity. It could be the loss of a loved one, walking on your loved one who just committed suicide. That is extremely traumatic. Or hold on to that horror the rest of your life. Complex PTSD comes in 3 phases. The first one is, and this is oftentimes when we're children, we have what we call a foundational trauma. Parents move and I go to a new school, or they're divorced and I have to move into a new school. And the first day of school, I don't know anybody and I'm shy and I'm uncomfortable. And there's a warm breath of shame as I walk into that class and all eyes are staring on me. And in that moment, I just wish I could cease to exist and disappear because I'm embarrassed and I feel awkward. That's what I call a foundational trauma. That's the first time I've ever experienced that form of trauma. But then if it happens again and again and again and again, that's what I call procedural trauma. This, if you've ever seen the show A Christmas Story, Scott Farkas and his little minion friend keep, teasing everybody and beating up on kids. That's a form of procedural trauma. When after school you're afraid to go home because the Scott Farkases of the world are going to come and tease you and beat on you, and so you're terrified of that, or you're terrified to go home because Dad's going to be there, and Dad might be under the influence, or he has a temper and he becomes angry and enraged at the littlest thing. So they're chronically walking on eggshells. Or Mom and Dad are gone at work and you're a latchkey kid and you're just dreading going home because you're going to be so utterly alone and nobody's going to be there. The forms of complex trauma, or what I call procedural trauma, that it happens over and over and over again. And I'll just give this narrative that this is what life is. And I believe that this is what it's supposed to be. This is all that there is.
It's like an entrenched belief then that's probably harder to tease out and to correct.
And we don't even realize it's happening. And we blame God for the way we feel. If he would just fix this, then I'd be okay. Or if he would just do that, then I'd be okay. And the reality is this is entrenched trauma. And so complex trauma is, okay, so I've moved on past my family of origin, and these things keep happening. Then the men I date continue to beat me. I can come home and I'm lonely. I can't find anybody to be with.
Yeah.
It's where not only am I the victim, but now I'm also the perpetrator because I'm unconsciously setting myself up to this ritualistic symptoms or experiences that keep me stuck in that same mentality.
Well, it's because it's a strange thing because you both hate it, but it's also very comfortable because that's kind of all you know. And so, yeah, I think that seeking external help is exactly what's needed so that you can, start to peel the little threads from this woven fabric that's just not serving you anymore. But you have to be aware and create different beliefs around what you've built, over time.
Yeah.
Complexity is there. You've got to, tease everything out, and it takes a lot of work. Can you share some success stories that you've seen of where people can now, enjoy their lives to, it could be anything that they were struggling with, but that you've seen just the outcomes of the work that they put into healing?
I could share numerous. One of which that I just filled for her. I have a gal that came back from back east. This happened 7 or 8 years ago. She flew in. We picked her up at the airport and brought her in for residential treatment for substance abuse. She was addicted to meth. She had recently lost her children and to the courts, and her parents were given custody of the children and promised her that she'd be able to get them back as soon as she got out of treatment. While she was in treatment, her father died, who she was supposed to. her sister died, who she was lost. And I had to share with her the news that they had passed away. And her mother was one of her perpetrators. She's very abusive, controlling. She literally had to fight over the course of the next several years for mom to get custody of her children back. But while here, she found religion, she found her faith, she found treatment and recovery. She found a new lifestyle. She found an aftercare, a group of people who just fell in love with her and embraced her. She had a bachelor's in social work, and so she wanted to finish off and go into her master's program and get a master's in social work, which she did.
Wow.
She's a practicing therapist
That's amazing.
in Utah. She went back, got her children, got legal custody of her children back. And what made it even more incredible, she did this having had a lot of ritualistic abuse up to the point, and it was so severe and pragmatic in her life. She actually formed dissociative identity disorder and had multiple alter ego states.
Oh, my
With
word.
everything piled against her. And with the right support group and the right therapy and willingness and humility to do the work, she continues to struggle. Life will never stop struggling,
Right.
but she's excelling at her recovery.
That's phenomenal. That makes my heart so happy to hear that. And I want all of our listeners to hear just that there's something true in that we are each unique and innately worthy of respect. And this client that you have has demonstrated that and put in tremendous work, tremendous humility, like you said, and is now believing her worth and her, self-respect, and to be able to respect and offer that gift to her children, and is now helping other people along the healing path. Like, that is a great outcome. That's a great, great story.
I've got story after story, then the joys. I can tell you this is what I've experienced. People who do what they're supposed to do in recovery look back and go, wow, I had no idea life could be that.
Wow.
And doing what we're supposed to do means we have to give a voice. We have to be willing to have the humility to do something different. And when we start willing to talk about it, when we're willing to share our story, by leaning into that vulnerability, life changes. And it is incredible journey, incredible experience.
I feel like in a way that being vulnerable and being in that state of extreme need for help, I feel like God fills in the gaps that we need to be able to have that inner strength to yearn for something better. And I think that I love that we're having this discussion after previously talking about faith and the role that faith plays, because I think that it's integral in this yearning for something better, and that we can't do it ourselves, that we need help. And help comes in the forms of therapists like you and a community and family, possibly, but definitely a higher power, definitely, God. I can't help but see the common thread between anyone that has survived something so horrific. I have yet to find somebody that doesn't give some form of thanks to God that helped pull them out.
Cool experience. Just before we got on today, my daughter who works for me, she calls me or sends me a text. Says, "Hey, do you want to take me to lunch today?" I'm like, yep, I do. Yeah. So like on the way down to get a bite to eat, she goes, "Dad, have you ever noticed with our clients and in your own life that Jesus was the most tragic loss, the most greatest betrayal ever? And yet it was also the greatest gift."
Mm.
And it was really profound. The conversation we had after that was, and as she started relating it to many of our clients that we've treated, how they have gone through such horrific trauma.
Yeah.
And yet those who succeed in doing the work are given some of the greatest gifts. It's almost like a fulcrum balance where God understands everything. And to the depths of misery, the depths of hell I've been through, is the greatest heights of joy that I'm going to come out. It
Right.
propels us forward. And I can tell you this, and listeners, this that is true every single time. The sorrows outnumber the joys, but the joys outweigh the sorrows.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That is so true. And as we're wrapping up, I want to end on that note. I really do, because I want any listener out there feeling like they're broken or like, they're reluctant about going into this new year after so many blows, after so many hardships and heartbreaks, that the future is bright and that there are so many people who are battling life right alongside you, that you're not alone and that you are completely unique, completely valuable and worthy. And if it's your desire to get help and to improve your life, that I hope that our conversation today with Jeremy and the work that he does, and that it can be an inspiration to you, and that that Big Ocean Women is a safe place for women that want to be the very best mothers for the rising generation, and that we can heal ourselves and that we can move that healing beyond ourselves and to carry those gifts and those rich, abundant blessings forward to our children, so that maybe with each generation we can heal a little bit more and a little bit more. And so that's just my thought to leave with you. And do you have any last words, Jeremy?
And the only thing I would ask is, it's my hope or prayer that if anybody's listening, it's okay to seek help. It's okay to find people who you can share your story to. And as you do so, that's where true healing takes place. We are a people that need one another. And loneliness is the darkest abyss of humanity. Don't be lonely. It's up to you to find and reach out. Not everybody's going to pull you up. Not everybody's going to love you and be there for you. You've got to be selective and find the ones who do care.
That's so wonderful. Jeremy, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. It's been such an enriching and an enlightening conversation. And let's move throughout this week and be looking maybe for people that might need a little bit of tenderness in their lives, and that we can be there for each other. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, share, subscribe. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's help each other heal and remind each other of our innate, unchangeable worth. Join us again next time. We will be talking with Provia Tutorenwe in Uganda about how she came to recognize her innate worth and how she now helps women in need get back on their feet and understand their potential.